Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ray Tampa podcast. Our podcast offers bold commentary on various subject matters with a laser-like focus on the truth. My name is Ray Tampa, and I'm the host of the Ray Tampa podcast. We have in our studio two talented and intelligent gentlemen, Mr. Russell Cato and Mr. Jamie Wilson III, my co-hosts. We're very pleased to have with us a very prominent and influential member of our community, Mr. Deveron Gibbons. Mr. Gibbons is a longtime businessman, educator, developer, former St. Petersburg mayoral candidate. In recent weeks, several very concerning articles have been reported in the Tampa Bay Times. Mr. Gibbons will lend us his knowledge and well-founded perspectives on the following. Number one, Mr. Gibbons' own opinion piece that was dated November 5th, 2023, entitled, St. Petersburg should put the community's needs above costly stadiums. Number two, the highly regarded bipartisan organization, the League of Women Voters, surveyed nearly 800 residents between January 20th, 2024 and February 5th, 2024 about the Rays Stadium deal. Number three, and on February 21st, 2024, the Times published an article titled, Southern Poverty Law Center is looking into gas plants and Rays Stadium deal. The group, based in Florida, is strongly collaborating in this investigation. Mr. Gibbons, let's begin by asking you to talk to us about the title and subtitle of your article. The title says, St. Petersburg should put forth. Give me a second here. St. Petersburg should put forth communities' needs above costly stadiums. Title. The subtitle says, why is the city subsidizing a massive development when the money is needed for so many other things? End of quote. Mr. Gibbons, please share with us some of those other things that should take priority over the stadium.
Thank you, Mr. Tampa, and thank you guys for having me back on the show. It's always a pleasure to be here with y'all. Quite frankly and plainly, the title speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. There are so many other issues that this community has dealt with. And I'll go back, Mr. Tampa and Jamie and Mr. Cato. When I was a kid, I remember going distinctly to the stadium site, and it was called the Florida Suncoast Dome. That's I'm correct about it.
Correct.
And they had this big shindig, right? I remember they tore down everything and they had this big deal. And they had the shovel ceremony, and they had all the people in the community. And there were a lot of African-American people there because they had been displaced from that site.
Exactly.
And I remember going, and they had all kind of games and other things, and they had little shovels, and they talked about the future. That had to have been 40 years ago. I'm 51. Right. So that had to be about 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 40 years I've lived here, we have continued to argue about the same things over and over and over and over again. And it's sad, Mr. Tampa, that I have to say this, but I think most people know this. There are so many, and I won't call them Jim Crow, I won't call them Uncle Tom. There are just so many sellouts of people who go around with their hands out and they get a few bones and a few dollars that ain't really worth a lot to them and no one else, and they sell out the entire community.
Yeah.
We are still talking about quality healthcare. We're still talking about quality affordable housing. We're still talking about quality payment. let's look back in the history of St. Petersburg. Dr. King was headed to St. Petersburg when he died in Memphis. The next stop was here because they were doing a garbage strike based upon what? Wages and equal pay. We still talking about wages and equal pay here in St. Petersburg. You know, Dr. Uhura Williams, who Mr. Tampa saw yesterday and I saw this morning, his comments in the church this morning was, history is not repeated, it echoes.
Yes.
Think about it, the March on Washington and all these other things, they talked about equal pay, quality housing. I'm a man, I should be treated as such. We still dealing with police brutality. We still dealing with food deserts where our foods, well, we don't either have a food store or a grocery store of the caliber that other folks, and we still got a community on the north side. And I'm not knocking any portion of St. Petersburg, but what I am saying is when you look at 38th Avenue North and 4th Street, there's a Publix right across the street from each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can't get a decent food operation, a store, a grocery store in an entire community that funds everything else. If you look at the dollars and how African Americans spend money, we spend more money on all kinds of things than even folks who have money. People that tend to have more money are more misers than anything else. They keep their money. That's why generationally it turns over to their family.
Right.
We tend to be we're spenders. So why wouldn't we be able to get a grocery store? So when you talk about that article specifically talks about there are some definitive needs in our community. Why are we having a law program that talks about how to keep gentrification from happening? And why should it be a law program, Mr. Tampa and Jamie and Mr. Cato? Is because what's the number one thing that happens in our community? How do we lose our houses? Probate. Right. Because grandma ain't left the house to one specific person. You got 14 people fighting over. Yeah. So we lose our wealth every day. City ain't saying nothing. We don't have the same things that other communities have. City's not saying anything. They were promised 40 years ago, jobs, opportunity, economics. I see people selling ice cream in the stadium. That's it. There are no executives within this. Name one person that came, that even played on the field, that came out of that organization and that has done. You have Fred McGriff, who's from this area, they could have hired and put into the front office. There have been so many people, Carl Crawford. All those people that make all this money for baseball and Major League Baseball and their particular team, we've seen no benefit. So if you're talking about from the front office all the way down to the vendors, we are service workers. We have not benefited at all from this current stadium. And the new one. All that they're going to do, I can guarantee you, I'm going to say this on this show, it's the first time I ever said it publicly, they're going to sell this team once they get all these subsidies and go off and ride off into the sunset and be billionaires again off the backs of the taxpayers. And we're going to still be paying this bill 30 years from now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm asking this question. I do appreciate everything you've said. Definitive needs, healthcare, housing, city wages, food desert, et cetera, et cetera. Really appreciate it. But this question, do you feel it's impossible from a financial standpoint for the raise deal to happen in conjunction with the concerns you identified?
Yes, it's impossible.
Impossible.
It's impossible.
Okay.
Number one, we don't have the details. And I think that's the one thing. You said I'm a businessman. You've been in business. Jamie's been in business. Mr. Cato's been in business. The one thing you always get up front on any deal you get is what? A contract. We don't have, what's the details of the contract?
Don't have one.
Everybody keeps asking how many actual affordable housing units are going on this site? What is it going to look like? How many restaurants, bars, and so many, there's no details in this deal. How many of those are going to be actually owned by minorities? Better question, Mr. Tampa. Let me go back. Let me take a step back. Better question to you all is, what does the contractor look like on this site? Because that's the person that's going to make a ton of money.
Yes.
And there are no African-American contractors that can be the number one contract on it because they don't have the bonding capability to do that. So yet again, we are being duped, but we have an African-American mayor who says that he wants to bring equity and all these other things back to back to what does he call it? You don't call it the gas plant area.
Yeah.
That's what they keep referring to, the gas plant. Okay. You can't bring nothing back to the gas plant without details in the deal that specifically speak to how people of color and the people who have been run off the site so many years ago, how they're going to benefit and how their families in the past that have left there and didn't get anything going to benefit.
Well, I knew you would know what you're talking about. So again, thank you for being here to share your expertise, your knowledge, your perspectives. I want to move to the League of Women Voters and the survey they conducted. They, in their survey, interviewed, as I may have stated earlier, almost 800 city residents. One particular question yielded results that a total of 80% of those surveyed would like to see the city and county negotiate a better deal. 80%. And of those 80%, 69% strongly feel that way. And another 11% feel that way. What are your thoughts?
Again, the devil's in the details. I don't know who came up with the I don't know who came up with that quote that if you want an African American not to know what's going on, just put it in a book. Or put it in writing.
Okay.
They're not gonna read it. But in this case, I don't know who's at the wheel at the city, or even at the county. I've been asked so many times in the last 45 days to run for county commission. I'm thinking about running for an office again. I said I would never do that. But I'll tell you, Mr. Tampa, to answer your question more directly, is that the devil's in the details. And I can assure you, if you and I walked out, me, you and Jamie and Miss Cato walked down the street and we asked 4 people, what does the deal look like for that stadium site? Nobody could tell you. I could guarantee you that we probably could ask 6 out of 10 people in City Hall
They wouldn't know.
what the details of the deal are, and they couldn't tell you.
They wouldn't know.
I bet you at least one lawyer in the city legal department we could ask and they would know.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, it really does come down to what are we putting on the site? And the reason that's very, very, very important is if you look at cities who have done well with stadium deals, they usually don't give up the farm. Somebody's putting something in the deal with them. It's a partnership. It's a P3 kind of public-private partnership type of thing. In this deal, we are subsidizing this, and they're saying it's one, we're giving 680 million or something like that. Some preposterous number like that. But we're not looking at the total effect. How long is it going to take us to buy down and pay off the debt?
Yes.
That goes down to my grandkids' problem. Right? So it really is not the amount that we're looking at. And that's why the details are very, very, very important. And I'll stop on this point. The other reason that is very, very important is if you look at all of the stuff that's going on this site and they're talking about, you and I, Ms. Cato, Jamie, all of us have seen Laurel Park. We saw the original Jordan Park, Laurel Park, all that stuff. If you talk about putting so much affordable housing on this site, right, and it becomes Section 8 housing, who is going to be, who is going to go to a baseball game with a crime-ridden neighborhood around the stadium?
Right.
And this is your west end of downtown that you're talking about developing. If you do this deal wrong, you forget Beach Drive, Central, all the other stuff, you will essentially kill all of that. And what I mean by that is not necessarily having too much affordable housing, but put too many restaurants and bars on this end, nobody will go to that end anymore.
Right.
I mean, and the perfect example of that is if people looked at the history of this city, because we got a lot of people that are transit that like all of us were.
Right.
When Tyrone Mall does well, what happens to Central Plaza? It dies. Because they go to Tyrone Mall. When Tyrone Mall ain't doing well, Central Plaza always come back. Right?
Either of you want to ask a question at this
I
point?
agree.
You agree?
I fully
You agree? Uh, Deveron, I want to move to another response
Yes.
that was elicited by that survey. The Legal Women voters shared that 78% agreed. 66 of those 78% strongly agreed that property taxes should be spent on critical needs, such as drinking water and wastewater, rather than a stadium.
Yeah.
Do you agree with these concerns as priorities?
I do, because a lot of people don't know about St. Petersburg is we actually owned at one point, I don't know if we still own it or not, because I don't want to misspeak on that, but we did own at one point more land in Hillsborough County than we owned in the entire city of St. Pete proper. And that was a water treatment plant up there called Cosme. All of our water came from Cosme. So our forefathers actually were smart. They went way up into Hillsborough County and piped that water all the way from Odessa, all the way back down to St. Pete.
Yeah.
I remember when I worked for DCA and the Secretary, Department of Community Affairs, and that was an agency under Jeb Bush. It doesn't exist anymore. But there was a county commissioner here that Jeb appointed, and I went to work for, was named Steve Seibert. And we studied what was called true cost accounting for, and it was related to growth and growth management and how cities and counties and communities could grow. And in that, we found that there's not enough water in the state of Florida. Water is going to be the next natural disaster that happens that we're not looking at. We're going to wake up one morning and turn our faucets and ain't no water going to come out. And what people don't understand about a water issue is, if you look at the state of Florida, most people who are not from Florida don't understand this. We do, because we've been here, we understand Florida. Florida is a rural state. So this water is used on agribusiness. The reason we don't have sales tax is because we produce so much agriculture.
Right. Yes.
And those farmers, they need that water. Now, we on the coast, St. Pete, Tampa, Miami, Palm Beach, and if you really think about it, after that, there ain't no big cities in Florida.
Right.
Unless you talk about Tallahassee and Pensacola, right? So, or Jacksonville, right? We are users of water. We don't produce anything that brings any revenue back. So the cost of water continually goes up. And in this area, we just constantly using, but we're not replenishing as, well, God's not replenishing as fast as we're using it. And so, yeah, that is going to be a huge issue. I remember Jeb Bush used to say it in the early 2000s that at some point we're going to pay for what we're doing with this water if we're not conserving it and doing it right. And that is going to be an issue that St. Pete's going to have long term.
Okay, well, excellent response. I really appreciate what you've had to say on that point. And I'm gonna have to admit that I was surprised that the responders identified that one as a major priority. But nevertheless, they did, and you explained it well.
Well, you should, Mr. Tim, because remember, the previous mayor dumped all the waste in the bay.
I know. I'm aware of that one. Okay, one last question about the responders to that survey. 77% agree that Rays/HINES should have to operate like any other corporation by raising their own money to pay for the land and facilities and pay property taxes rather than receive city subsidies. Nearly 2/3, 63% agreed. So what they're saying is let the Rays act like all other corporations and pay their own bills. What are your thoughts?
I would say 98% agree with that statement. And the only reason I say that other 2% is sometimes land and other things have to be thrown into deals like this one for the deal to work, right? Maybe not all of the land, But I most certainly agree with, at what point does this go back on the tax rolls and help the community? I most certainly agree with Hines is an outside group from another place that we have passed over so many other people who are from Florida and probably have the capability of doing this deal.
Mhm.
I was just telling you guys about the gentleman who got the $220 million deal up in Charlotte, African American, to renovate the Charlotte Hornets Stadium. I mean, we have not yet figured out that we have the talent and the capability to do these things if we just, number one, reach back and teach folks within our community and let them go, and then give them an opportunity. We don't give our folks an opportunity. But I most certainly agree with the fact that the money for baseball and a big baseball stadium, or any stadium deal like this one, that the end user, the folks who are gonna benefit off of this, should definitely have to put up some real money, not get a hold of public lands and then still don't have to put much in the deal. I mean, because you got to remember now, this stadium is no longer going to be a baseball stadium. The Rays are making that clear.
That's right.
It's going to be a multiplex type of deal. So they want concerts. So they're going to use this stadium, year round, and we're not benefiting from it. We're going to buy tickets,
Yeah.
but we're not going to benefit from that. That's what you're saying, that you want the land, the money, and the opportunity to promote other things in the stadium that we're not going to get any benefit from.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that point up, because there's some other points that are in that survey that people need to know. Right now, the Rays share the proceeds from their concessions and parking with the city. And I think the last check they wrote to the city was in the amount of about $640,000 shared revenue. But in this new deal, I'm told, and the survey suggested, that they're not going to have to share any more money with the city. They're not going to share any more money. Interesting. Okay, because of the time element, I want to move on to the next topic, and that deals with the group that's considering they're investigating the Rays deal. And the group is the Southern Poverty Law Center, very well-known, prominent organization. They are investigating the Rays Hines deal, city deal. Now, the legalities of their investigation, obviously I'm not privy, other than what was printed in the paper. And what was printed in the paper about that deal, and I have the article right here, and I'm just going to read a statement from the article. The Southern Poverty Law Center is now investigating the deal between St. Petersburg and the Tampa Bay Rays. The center, working with Faith in Florida, is reportedly concerned the city never met the conditions of the millions of dollars in federal money that helped it buy out the historically Black gas plant community decades ago. So I suspect that is the point of contention from a legal standpoint. When they got all these millions of federal dollars come with some attachments. So what they're investigating, did the city fulfill its contractual agreement based on those dollars?
And they're looking at history. They said it worked the first time. They're going to try it again this time.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly.
To respond to that, I would first ask you a question.
Yes.
Where are all these leaders?
Right. Thank you.
Who say they leaders in this community? And why would you let anybody into a new deal, Mr. Tim, without knowing the results of a past deal? I'm not going to go. You have been a business owner my entire life. I have never known you to go to a spot and you don't know everything about that place before you enter into an agreement about it. So all these people who are supposed to be leaders, instead of what they did, which was, and everybody, I'm talking about so many people all of them jumped on these teams to try to get a piece of what they call the American pie, this dream. Instead of saying, no, Mr. Mayor, no, Mr. County, let's sit down. Tell me what happened over the years with what was here. And so we don't make the same mistakes again. But we so motivated by the American dollar and wanting to be more like other folks as opposed to doing what's right by the entire community.
Correct.
And so to answer that question from a legal standpoint, that can be, we live in a litigious society. You can sue for anything.
Yeah.
But there is some value to those statements that were made by the youth law, by the Southern Poverty Law Center. We can look back and challenge whether or not this was a good deal for an entire community that was displaced. I mean, very much displaced. I mean, my friend Senator Steve Bradford in California is doing they have that the restitution. What is it called? Reparations. They have that reparations committee. He runs that committee out there. And when he talks about the effects of this, when I talked to Senator Bradford about it, he's talking about, like, if you look generationally at Black boys, Black men, and other folks who have been incarcerated, they've been displaced. Like, there was a whole family that owned a beach. They still didn't get the real value of the beach.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Or look at, like Dr. Uhura Williams was saying this morning. Okay, we'll acknowledge that we took your lands, but we ain't gonna give you the money back for your land.
Right.
Or we ain't gonna give you your land back. So why acknowledge it?
Well, they have to acknowledge it because it's a fact.
Yeah, it's a fact.
So well known.
But it's also a fact, Mr. Tampa, that if you take something from me and it had value over the years, then I lost the value of that.
Generally, you would like to think you're going to get reparations.
That's exactly right. And I'm not a proponent. I'm not sitting here saying we should be giving reparations, but what I am saying is that the value time proposition of money and looking at what they're talking about, we definitely should be looking back to see what actually came out of that. Was there any good results out of that? And if it was not, we need to move on.
Okay, I'm going to speak to what you were asking. Where are the leaders? Where are the leaders? One of the leaders in the Faith in Florida group, strong leader at that, is Pastor Manuel Sykes, Dr. Manuel Sykes. He has been outspoken in the strongest way against this race deal. As a matter of fact, here's the article. And who's in the article?
Right there in the picture.
Dr. Sykes. Dr. Sykes. My question to you, he's so strong against this. Have you had an opportunity to speak to Dr. Sykes?
I actually was on his radio show and we talked about it. And we talked about a lot of different issues. And I would tell you that I call him Uncle Manny. And I will tell you, I think he's right on this issue. Not because I don't think that his motivation is about money. I think his motivation is about let's get it right the first time instead of trying to push this thing through and see a whole bunch of folks who have money continue to get money off these deals instead of I think what he's really looking at is that there's a macro and a micro, and he's into the micro. What happens to these young kids who you very well know better than anybody, all of you, because y'all been involved in education. What about these kids that are from 9th grade to 12th grade not making any gains? Why aren't we spending any money on education? Why aren't we spending any money on having a quality place for these kids to live with their parents so that when they get up in the morning, they're not cold or hot in the summertime? Why not they have good meals, right? Why not have good opportunity of having a summer job? I mean, all these things that we talking about, this deal could effectuate change towards those. And we really haven't even taken a look at it.
Well, here we go again, fellas. Time is upon us. I hate this particular point where we have to try and wrap it up. And being that is the case, we want to thank our guest, Mr. Gibbons.
Thank y'all for having me.
He's always done a great job, and certainly he did a great job today. I want to thank my awesome co-hosts for the great contributions they offered to the podcast. We want to thank our listeners for tuning in to the Ray Tampa podcast and ask that you do so each and every Tuesday evening, 5:30 p.m. on 99.1 FM, The Bird. With all that being said, sponsorships are welcome. Good evening.